Good afternoon and welcome. Today is Wednesday, June 26th, 2024. This is our first of two work sessions this afternoon. The one before us is with regard to the 2025 compensation discussion that we have every year as part of our budget process. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner from District 1, joined by my Commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens, District 2, and Jody Shattuck McNally from District 3. And of course, we're joined by our County Manager, Lorenda Volker, and actually our Assistant County Manager, who's keeping an eye on things. At this time, I'll turn it over to Lorenda to cue things up, and then I imagine we'll turn it over to our HR Director and her team.
We will turn it over very quickly. So you're exactly right. This is something we do each year as part of our budget preparation process. We do put a placeholder in the budget as departments are beginning to formulate their budgets, but this is the session where we ask for your direction about what to include in budget planning. So the team has done some research. You might recall that last year we lost one of our data sources, and so they have been working throughout the year to replace that, and I think they've done a great job. You're about 80% there, I think. There's still more to do, but this is good data, good information, and we'll hand it over to you all.
Thank you, Lorenda. Welcome, colleagues.
Great. Thank you. My name is Bridget Paris, and I'm the HR Director, and I'll have each of the staff here with me share their name and role also, and then we'll get started.
Right. I'm Christine Keenest. I'm the Employee Relations Manager.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Eileen Brittingham. I am one of the Senior HR Generalists here at Larimer County, and I have been working with Bridget and learning the comp for the last few years, so I will be speaking mostly to you about these items today.
Yep.
And my name's Evan Scott. I'm one of the HR Generalists and kind of just learning how this whole process goes.
Wonderful. Welcome. And before we begin, just a quick comment that we have our very astute budget team also present, and they will be here to make sure that any discussions of numbers are accurate discussions.
Awesome. Thank you. So our agenda is we will go through the philosophy and our plan design, the market and economy, and strategies and options. Our philosophy, compensation for our employees, is based on the nature and level of work performed and how well the employee accomplishes that work. So the first thing we do is we go out and we look at some external factors, which is our market-based analysis. In a little while, Bridget will talk a little bit more about our economic slide and what we see going out in the market and in the economy that helps us make a recommendation to you guys on what we should do moving forward with our pay plan. Competitive. We go out there and we look at salaries. We look at what is Fort Collins doing, what is Loveland doing, what are our large counties doing, and basically we do job analysis, and we look at each job and see where it's placed in the market and if we're still being competitive with that job. So how it works. So as Lorenda stated earlier, we have some software that we use. We use a system called PayFactors. PayFactors is actually a national software. The data contributed is automated, both from us and from other organizations. We do ongoing review of job matches in that system, looking to make sure that our jobs are matched correctly and to the closest that we can. We do pricing projects twice a year, so we're doing those in October and then in May or June. And basically what that's doing is we're looking for trending. Are jobs trending up? Are jobs staying the same? And how is that looking? And what do we need to maybe look into a little bit further? We have approximately 300 jobs that we look at and match in that system. So as Lorinda mentioned earlier, a couple of years ago, we lost our provider, which we've had for several years, which was our Employers Council. And so over the last year, Bridget and I have been working with other large counties, cities, and municipalities, and we've developed what we're calling the CPEC database. And so what is happening here is we are collecting data, again, from those cities, municipalities, and larger counties. And this is actually giving us line item data of what each employee is actually making, as well as those min and those max. So we can really dig into that data to make sure that our employees are being paid at a competitive salary. Here we are, it's May, June. We're here to talk to you about what's going on and what's happening and get your recommendations. And then throughout the year, we're always looking at updating job descriptions, making sure we're capturing exactly what employees are doing. We're doing pay reviews. We're comparing those against the data that we have in those softwares. We're doing internal equity reviews. We're doing classification analysis, making sure that, and if an employee says their job has changed significantly, we're looking at reclassifying. We're looking to make sure that a job is still classified correctly in our system based on those software information and the data that we've done. And then we do job studies. We go out and we meet with employees and we sit down and we say, hey, what do you do every day? Show me what work you are doing. And again, we're doing that analysis to make sure that our employees are in a competitive job and competitive salary.
And Eileen, before you move to the next slide, just want to check to see if my colleagues have any questions about the previous one or this one regarding data collection and that sort of thing. Do you folks? I have a very quick question, and that is regarding the you mentioned that we do pricing projects twice a year, and that's to determine trends. Can you be a little bit more explicit about what is a pricing project and how does that help us determine trends?
Sure. So a pricing project is essentially, we start with making sure that that job is matched correctly, right? So we're taking an HR generalist job, and we're saying, okay, are the duties outlined in that job still correct? Great. Is it matched correctly to the job in either the CPEC or the pay factors system? And then we run a data analysis, basically. So we tell the system, these are all our jobs. These are the jobs that we've matched to in your system. Tell us what pay is out there for those jobs. And it brings us back that pay data. And then we say, okay, great. Is our job still within that plus minus 5% that we do for?
That's definitely very helpful. And in terms of trends, does it show us, are things going up, or things being variable? If you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Sure.
With pay factors, we're doing that analysis that Eileen mentioned twice a year. So in October and again in April. And so when she says we get that value of the HR generalist, for example, we can see what that looked like in October, and then we can see what the value of that job looked like again in April.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the trending as we look at what's happening. Again, those are based on individual employees' pay, how the employee is paid for those jobs. So they are impacted by organization, workforce, or demand trends. So sometimes you see it go up, but if it's a single incumbent job, like an HR director, a big change in a trend could be related to turnover of that individual person. So we like to keep an eye on things over time and just watch, right, and see what those trends are like.
Great. Thank you both. That's very
Yep.
helpful.
Great. So as we've kind of talked a little bit about already, how our pay plan works is each of our jobs is placed within a job category. So we have our professional category, we have our resource management category, and then we complete individual analysis to those matched jobs. And that's kind of what we talked about with both the CPEC data and the pay factors system. Bridget's already touched on, we review the trends again from, annually as well as year over year. And Bridget will talk a little bit more about that year over year analysis here shortly. And then all of our jobs, we analyze them to make sure that they are aligned with that first quartile. So is that 2020?
Fifth percent.
The 25th percentile. Great.
Yep. And so we have that first is the market adjustment, right? That's what we do at the beginning of the year based on the analysis that Eileen just talked about. That's where we move our whole pay plan, right? So we're going to say, in order to keep up with that trend in the change of all the jobs year over year, we're looking at it bigger because we're looking at our whole pay plan. We look and see what's reasonable for us to adjust our entire pay plan. And that's what we call market. That's what happens at the first day of the first pay period of the year, where we adjust the whole plan. Employees also receive that same increase for market so that they don't fall behind, right? Because if I'm going to move the whole pay plan, I want to make sure that I move the employee also so that they stay at that same range penetration. So that's that range market adjustment that we give to employees, and that's our strategy for deciding how to make that whole pay plan adjustment.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That makes a lot of sense, and I know there's a lot of factors involved with this. And maybe you stated this and I didn't quite catch it, but we live in a very fast-growing, popular area that housing prices are, through the roof. But this is not something that the rest of the country and other areas are not experiencing. When you talk about looking at other employers and stuff, or hopefully we're comparing similar areas that have high housing prices and stuff, or how do we adjust for some of those? Not everywhere is the fastest growing area in the state or in the area, region. Is there some kind of adjustment for that kind of factor for employees to be able to at least not, live somewhere close to where they work? Just curious.
Yeah, not specifically. So we don't do geographical adjustments based on the data we receive for other organizations. And sometimes those geographical adjustments could include factors such as housing. We do not do that. Generally, and this is not perfect, but employers will have a hard time hiring people if they are not in salaries of which if they're not paying salaries to which employees could afford to live in the area. It's not a perfect driver, but you do see salaries in areas with higher cost of housing, childcare availability, having higher salary rates than other organizations that don't have those same economic factors. So answering your question, we don't do a specific differential related to housing, but there are other areas that have their salaries included in our salary analysis that also have higher housing.
That's
right?
helpful, yeah.
But we pay for the job, the work being done, and as of now, we aren't paying to account for things like insurance or childcare or housing. That doesn't factor into how we set our salary.
Thank you.
Any follow-up there, Commissioner? Thank you. Okay, please proceed.
Awesome.
Good. Merit.
Merits. So merit increases are given annually to our employees if they have essentially met the criteria of their job. So the merit piece, we also come and bring recommendations to you guys. This helps employees progress through the range, right? So you have the market, which is moving the range, and then your merit helps you get through reaching eventually the top of that pay range if you stay in that same position.
It essentially recognizes another year of experience, right? You're bringing more value to that job because you've been doing it another year, which is the recognition of the merit.
Any questions, comments, observations at this point? I suppose I'll offer something. I probably offer these questions every year. And that is regarding, obviously, there are lots of reasons why we want to pay people properly, for all the reasons. Are we able to analyze, well, one of them is job retention and recruitment. Are we able to do any kind of analysis to show that because we are doing our best to, adjust these ranges and then, salaries, proposed merit increases, how that might be affecting retention and recruitment and how that might be saving us costs on that end? Do you follow what I'm asking, colleagues?
I do.
Yeah.
And I probably ask it every year, I suppose.
Yeah, there's not usually a direct tie to turnover or retention related to compensation. It's a big factor. We don't want to say it's not, but there are many reasons employees may leave or may come or may stay with Larimer County. And so we do exit interviews, we do watch turnover. We've built a tool called Workforce Analytics. That's what we call it. It's Tableau dashboards that I think most of our department heads have access now, and we review every 6 months with them. That includes compensation analysis of their jobs, so they can see how employees are paid comparatively, what that looks like. They can look at separations and trends and kind of workforce information so that we can watch that. So I can't tie it exactly to pay, but we do keep track of it. We're watching. Do we see a trend in people leaving a certain job? And do we need to address what that looks like? For example, I think it's been 2 years, I kind of lose track now, where we said we have really high turnover in the caseworkers. We cannot retain them. We're losing people under a year. There is most definitely a pay piece to this. And so we will come see you and highlight those. We do it on a smaller scale with the departments in their unique areas.
No, thank you. I was reminded of the adjustments, specific adjustments we made to increase the salaries and other benefits for child protection workers in particular. And of course, there are lots of factors that contribute, salary being one of them, but other factors contributing to why, turnover and those kinds of things.
Yep.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, colleagues. Eileen.
Awesome. So our compensation strategies, again, talking about our employees get an annual eval, which progresses them through the range with a merit increase. They receive that merit increase as long as they are meeting expectations of their job. And an equal merit is given to all employees, so we set that standard throughout. Variable merit, we have a couple of departments that do this. This does have to be approved by Bridget and have the same budget provided. Again, for employees who meet expectations of performance, employees receive that variable amount. And then we don't do this, but it is an option that is out there. It doesn't add to base, but there is a lump sum that is another strategy that can be used. I'll turn it over to you.
Any questions about those strategies for giving increases to employees?
Colleagues, yes, Commissioner Stevens, yeah.
With something like the lump sum, is that used ever for somebody who's like at the top of the pay range, so that they're at the maximum pay range, and so that's a way to compensate them without, because they
Yes,
would not
compounding
normally.
budget.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where you see it most frequently, is that some variation of the increase that's given to employees across the board is given to employees that are at the max. Sometimes it's a portion, sometimes it's all. That really depends on your budget, what's available, what your philosophy is, because, we've established a max of a range for a job because that's the max value of the job that we are, compensating for that role. So we don't like to pay above, but then you also have employees who continue to gain experience and become more and more valuable. So if they've reached the max of their range at 10 years, they will not get a merit increase again. They only get the market. They only get that adjustment to the range and that initial amount. Right now, we have about 7% of employees that are at the max of their range. As we continue to keep tenured employees, they'll progress through their range and we'll see that amount increase. That, in 2022, when we did the big pay adjustment, that's when we had a lot of people come off the max of the range because we moved them. So I'd expect we'll see that at the max number increase over the next few years.
So one of the tools we do have, so we don't typically do across the board lump sum increases just based on seniority, but we do have guiding principal bonuses. And so if there's a person at the top of the range who's done extraordinary work, we tie it to one of the or more of the guiding principles, and departments have that discretion. There's a department discretion level, a level I have to approve, and then a level much higher that you all would need to approve. And so we're seeing departments utilize that more and more for outstanding performers who are at the top of their range.
And I'd also like to add or ask, folks who reach the top of their range, one can assume that they are people who have different responsibilities or have performed well. If that assumption is correct, then is another strategy to perhaps consider changing their job classification or something along those lines? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Job classification is based on the duties that are performed.
Oh, yeah.
And so unless they take on additional duties that significantly change the role, so I'll use HR as an example.
Okay.
I have a couple HR techs that do our recruiting, right? They help departments with job posting, screening applicants, do our drug testing and our screening. In order for them to be reclassified, I would have to have additional available work to assign to them that was higher level than what they are doing now. So I would have to then either have more work show up at a higher level or take it from someone else or move it around. So not very often is a reclassification a strategy unless there's a business need to deliver that work.
Okay, thank you.
They tend to be more efficient at their work, I think is a good example. So if I have an HR tech who's been doing this role for 10 years, they've seen more recruitments, they have seen more strategies, they likely are more proficient in the software that they're using, right? They can move along quicker. They may have gotten to know their departments and their hiring managers. So somebody who's experienced, I may see them do 15 recruitments versus my newer staff who are at 6. So I do think at the max of the range, we are seeing employees performing at a more efficient level.
And I suppose another opportunity for employees to move into a different job classification is if somebody in that position moves somewhere else, or perhaps they retire or leave, then I believe we focus internally to try to move people into those kinds of positions if they have the qualifications. Is that correct?
Yes, they tend to be our most qualified employees. They know our policies, they know our practices. So in most cases, they perform very well in interviews for selection or promotion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect. Well, this is my slide. This is the what's happening slide. And this is where we look at a bunch of economic factors, considerations of what's happening around us. And internally, overall 2023 employee satisfaction was at 86%. This is the score that is primarily satisfaction. It doesn't include neutral responses. So you may see this number look a little different depending on where it's reported because sometimes we include neutral responses and sometimes we do not. For this purpose, I am looking only at our representative, we're satisfied, the positive scores. This is very consistent. We don't see much change in this year to year. Colorado unemployment rate, 2023, 3.2. Fort Collins, Loveland, 2.6. This means unemployment's really low, right? So when we hear concerns about recruitment, maybe not getting the applicants that we'd like to see, most people are working. So in order for us to get those applicants, we have to steal them? Is that the right language?
I suspect if you worked on it, you could come up with a better term.
I think so
You
too.
may want to consult with our attorney.
We shouldn't be stealing, but we should be enticing, right? National employment growth for 2023 is quite a bit lower than 2022, almost half, so we're at 2.3. Colorado employment growth, just a little bit higher than national. Fort Collins employment is 3.2, so that is higher, which means we're doing a lot more up here. All Colorado pay projection increases, this is based off of some survey projections that we get from our peers. For 2025, total pay increase projection is about 4%. Pay structure is 2%. The tricky part about those numbers that I'd like to call out is that a lot of organizations move their pay structure and do not give that increase to employees. So we are an organization who moves the pay structure and gives the increase to the employee. So the 4% is a total increase across the board. The pay structure at 2% may or may not be funded. That's just sharing how they would move their plan. Is that good?
Questions, comments, colleagues? Looks like we're okay.
And then CPI, when I also want to call it, when we put these numbers down, we're using, for the most part, for the economic ones, March's Colorado Legislative Council report. And as they finalize numbers, some of the numbers do adjust. So if as you look back at other CPI numbers or at other times, it's because the numbers continue to be validated as time goes on for both projections and CPI. So if we are off a couple, sometimes that's due to timing of when the legislative report's published.
Yes, Commissioner Stevens.
Is CPI a factor, or is just a point of information?
It's one of the considerations that we put in when we're looking at the merit. So for market, we like to look at that year over year. We're looking at how jobs themselves are moving that are relative to what we're doing. With CPI, it's one of the factors when you look at this whole list on how we determine the market or the merit increase. So if you think about it, I'm trying to put a whole pay picture together for the employees. So if we give them a 2% increase in January, and then we also give a 3% merit, the employee's salary is going up 5% that year. So I'm going to look at CPI. I'm going to look at some of the wage growth going. There could be competition if Northern Colorado's growing. What kind of retention do I want to look at? What kind of progress do I want the employee to make through their range? We have 40% wide ranges. So if we do 3% merits a year, it's going to take an employee 13 years plus to get through their range, right? If they started at the bottom. So all of these factors, CPI included, go into that total picture of decisions that we make on what we recommend to you. So not a complete factor, but I do like to see, if I'm doing 2 and 3, that means the employee's seeing a 5% increase. I'd like to be above the CPI.
I mean, we have had,
Answer.
yeah, we have had
Kinda.
years where it's so, I mean, in the past couple of years where it's been so high, there was no ability to raise beyond that.
Correct. So on our compensation page, we do the historical pay increase information, and we include both CPI and what Larimer County has done, so you can watch the trend of how our pay increases to employees have compared against CPI. So yes, we couldn't do 8 one year, which was, I want to say 2022 might have been our 8% CPI. I think it was 7.6 or something. And our total increase to employees that year was either 5. We might have hit 7 on average because we did the big pay change. But over time, like this year, we'll see a 5% increase to employees, and CPI is projected at 3.5. So we'll be a little ahead this year. Not that it helps when we see significant increases in other cost areas. Insurance has been the biggest thing that we see employees being hit with this year.
Because CPI does not include the cost of housing or the cost of
Not,
childcare.
it's just the cost of goods, which is
Goods.
why it's one piece.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you,
it's
good
im-
discussion.
It is
Yes,
important
please.
to note that there isn't, it's a marker, it's a thing we look at to make sure that we are competitive and that employees aren't leaving us because other places are more competitive, just like the market study. But it's not magic, and we don't tie directly to it. And people used to call your annual raise a CPI increase, and that's not really accurate. It probably never was. But it does help with their standard of living, and it does help us stay competitive and help people, stay at the county. But it's not magic.
And isn't it also true that Larimer County is either entirely unique or mostly unique in that we go through this process a little bit differently, that we establish recommendations for the budget, looking at these potential personnel costs, and then we put that as a baseline. Could you speak to that, please?
Yep, that is the kickoff of the next slide.
Oh,
I
what do
feel
you
like
know?
you've done this before. Things to consider, one is exactly what you talked about, our timing and how we budget. Larimer County this is gonna be Bridget's summary, but puts our employees first. We project in what it is going to cost us to continue to set compensation with the philosophy that we use. And that goes into part of the target adjustments when departments are working to build their budget. I'm speaking on the budget piece, but we do have budget people, so if I miss it, snag me. But we do build it in as we get started with a guesstimate, which means it's not what's left that goes to employees. It is part of our budget process where we make good choices about services and staffing as we go to the next year. Yep, and we go first. Larimer County is one of the first organizations to make their decisions about compensation. So a lot of times we're asking what other organizations are going to do, and we get a lot of I don't knows. So it's hard to use that direction from our other organization because some decisions aren't made till later in August or September for a lot of organizations.
Thank you.
Yep. As you touched on, this year, we put in a 2% market and a 3% merit included in the target projections for departments as they've already begun to build their budget. We do recognize that we have some ballot initiatives in our future that can also restrict property or revenue from property taxes. So that's definitely not my area, but we're always conscious of what impacts we have coming towards us when we make our recommendation. How we're going to allocate. Again, we went through those 3 methods of allocation, the pass-fail merits, the variable, as well as the lump sum. What we recommend continues to base. So if an employee stays with us, their base salary will go up that 5%. And just to note, as we work on estimates, we recognize that a 1% pay increase is about 1.8 million, and 55% of that is general fund. And I recently learned that there is about another 15% of that does support departments from general fund that also assists with that cost. Yes. I'm double checking with my budget people behind me. So general fund does support a significant amount of the personnel increases. There are departments that, when we make this decision, have to come up with the additional funds without the supported general fund.
Yes, Commissioner Shaddock McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but for the public who are listening, that 1% pay increase, this is for employees across all elected offices throughout the entire county, is that correct?
Yes, I'm confirming, just to
Yeah.
make sure.
So, so really, we're looking at this for all employees, and whether, it doesn't matter who's elected officer, and it's everyone who, this is what we're considering.
Yes, there's one variable that stands out, which is our step plan, which I'll touch on also because it uses a different market kind of methodology in terms of how we establish pay. We use mins and maxes for that as opposed to like an average market value. So there are times, and this will be a year that I recommend a different step plan adjustment than I will recommend for the open range plan. And that's just because the data is different that we use for those.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. This is I think we still have an 8-year overview here. So if you ever want to look back and you're curious about what's happening, this is what we've done over the years. I put a handful of, I shouldn't take credit for it. Eileen put a handful of the different metrics in for this year. And so it's just a good snapshot to look back on. You can see over time, we're pretty consistent with a 2 and a 3% recommendation. It typically covers the adjustments. So I don't know if you don't have any questions. I'm not going to read through that table. We've already touched on the factors. I'll just keep going. Good. So now it comes to our recommendations. Our recommendations are the 2% market and the 3% merit. We were able to use the CPEC data this year, but it was not trendable. And the reason why it's not trendable is we did not have survey data last year. I think you'll remember us sharing from Employers Council, which means I would be comparing Employers Council data from 2022 with this CPEC data service in data that we collected in May for 2024. And we have different participants. It's a little bit of a different data set. And while it gave us a good base to make a recommendation, I still am not confident on the trending. And so we were able to utilize the data to make a basis for our recommendation. I'm just not able to trend year over year. We'll be able to do that next year. The CPEC database is what we're calling Colorado Public Employers Compensation. This is actually something that our IT team built. And we have led that effort to get public employers data because pay factors doesn't allow for line item organization data. We couldn't see what Fort Collins paid, or we couldn't see what other organizations that are public are paying. And that's really a benefit of being in public sector to make sure that we have that competitiveness. And so this new database tool, I have to give kudos to our build team that was able to put this together. They've created the access and the ability for, we had 39, even with our smaller counties. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember. We were close to 40 organizations participate and load their data. We'll do another data collection in October, so now this one will also happen twice a year, and we hope to increase that participation even further, hoping it continues to help smaller counties and smaller cities also. Even though we don't use their data, it's a great opportunity for them to share data with each other. So pretty excited about this tool. It will continue to get better, and it'll give us secure, ongoing, repeatable access to our data set.
Commissioner Shaddock McNally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you answered my question, but, so we built this, but we have to have data, so we're asking everybody to give their data, and it sounds like you've gotten quite a great participation. And it sounds like you're allowing others to use the tool to help them, which encourages them to maybe participate.
Correct?
And so which is kind of cool, right? Because we're trying to help everyone. So how many other municipalities or counties are actually, do we know who's using it? And how, can you track how they're accessing it? Is it like IT can track who's on there and who's using it? And what's the participation from those people who are, who have given the data? Just curious.
Yeah, so this becomes our primary source for public data. So to my knowledge, and mostly we focus on the engagement with our Category 1 counties, the big ones, and large municipalities, which are usually over 30,000. That's our focus. Eileen probably could give us some more information about that, but we have a committee going. I am not sitting on the committee, mostly because I did spearhead this, and I'm the HR director, not the comp person, and my goal is to really let the comp people have it, but I think the committee, most everyone is downloading and using the data. They do need some assistance to analyze the data. Many aren't able to do that in-house or have the tools, so there will be some contracting and stuff in place, but I would say 90% of them used it to help them make decisions about their compensation.
Cool.
Is that fair?
I would say so, yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool, being collaborative and partners, and, because when, we all win when we work together, so I think that's pretty great.
Yeah,
So-
and it'll be a committee that runs it ongoing, adding new jobs and continue to work on the rules. It won't just be, even though we do the technology piece, the committee will be in charge of how the collection and the survey works. So pretty exciting and fun, and we just like all our comp people. So anyway, we'll have CPEC data to trend, and that'll give us a little bit better basis for market next year. I just wasn't comfortable with the results I was getting from trending data using 2-year gap and 2 separate sets of data. So I'm comfortable with a 2% range adjustment for the overall plan. I would recommend a 3% adjustment for the step plan. So to move that gets our starting rates right up above 80, which puts us at about 8th ranking in our set of comparable organizations. So right about in the middle, we use about 16 there. And then for merit, I'd recommend 3%. I will note the 3% adjustment for the step plan is not fully funded based on the existing target. So John and I talked, and he did ask that I come and make that recommendation, knowing it is not fully funded in the existing target. So I wanted to call that out.
So the existing target was the market adjustment, which is 2%.
Yeah, they have a little bit, I'm gonna go for this, Matthew, and if I mess it up, snag me. It's a 3.5% of personnel, right? Because here goes Bridget's bad math that we started with many, many years ago. 2% market happens for employees all year in the budget year. A 3% merit, because employees' evaluation dates are staggered, is not 3% in the budget year for all employees. It's about 1.5. So 2 plus 1.5 is 3.5 impact to the personnel costs. So when we look at the sheriff's budget and we do 3.5% on personnel, if I do a 3% adjustment right away first of the year, remember I move the step plan and I move the people, that only leaves them 0.5% of personnel to address all the step increases that continue as employees progress through their steps. We do have about, I think it's 55% of our certified deputies are maxed out, so only 45% of them will get a step increase. About 40% of our corporal sergeants and lieutenants are maxed out. So not all of them get a step. Our jail deputies are non-certified. I do have some certified in the jail, but non-certified are only in the jail. With such high turnover in that job, I only have 6-7% of those maxed out. So the bulk of those employees are getting their step increase. So that 0.5% doesn't fund the step increases, so it's not fully funded.
Thank you. Commissioner Shaddock McNally, questions or comments, please?
I have a couple questions and a comment. First, you talked about our deputies, or no, the sergeants and lieutenants and captains that are maxed out. And so you're saying they just get the merit, but some of those fine individuals are working and doing a lot of the leadership and things. So I'm wondering how that works out when they're maxed out. Is that just they're relying on the merit with the step plan then? Or
They just get that plan adjustment, that one in the beginning that happens the first of the year. So anyone who is maxed out, very similar to the regular plan, all that they're gonna get is that amount that I move the plan. So if I'm recommending the 3% for the step plan, the maxed out employees, whether it's certified deputies, corporal sergeants, lieutenants, only get the 3%. That's all they get. They would not get another increase throughout the year. So that's no different than our maxed employees in the open range.
I will say, though, about step plans, that's by design.
It
And
is.
so the idea is to move deputies, officers in law enforcement as quickly to the top of the step as you can, because that's their highest earning, and they typically have shorter careers. Typically, if you're out in the field, you don't work till you're 70 doing
Yeah.
law enforcement work, chasing bad guys, right? And so step plans by design are intended to max people out sooner.
Okay,
The ranges are based on the level of work and consequence of error and responsibility. And so lieutenants, sergeants obviously earn significantly more than a deputy would. So that's accounted for within the plan itself.
so when you said not fully funded, I hear we need money. So,
Well, maybe not me, but the sheriff.
okay,
And I don't know what that looks like. And again, this is a compensation recommendation. And so there are all those other budget considerations.
How are we supposed to support a recommendation if we don't have all the information regarding the step plan?
It may have to wait.
So I think, have you all costed these numbers? I'm looking at the budget team now, so why don't you come on up? It's a great time to have you join us at the
We did
table.
cost it.
HR did coordinate with the budget
I
office to
did.
make sure this was not a surprise today.
Hi. Matthew Bahanan with Budget Office. And so the difference between what we had as the placeholder, if you remember our initial target work session, and then this recommendation, which of course we don't know the data analysis until this month, is 615,000. So that would be the gap between what's currently built into the targets and, we've been working on, and then what is this recommendation of the 3% on the step plan.
And one of the critical things about this is it keeps that entry-level rate competitive as we're looking to fill the vacant deputy positions, but you can't, because of the way the plan is designed, you can't really just move the deputies and not address the other two layers above them. We want them to be competitive as well, but it's that entry level where we know we have, quite a few vacancies we need to fill that's important.
And one thing that might be valuable to share is we put together Larimer County's mins and maxes and our competitors in a ranking model. So when you look at it, you could see Larimer County's starting rate is 6th, but their max rate might be 9th. I'm more than happy to share that information in more detail if that's something you'd like to see. I just think we will continue to roll back a little bit if I don't account or recommend for that 3%. I do recognize it's not funded. John knows it's not funded, but I do think it's a consideration we can make. I don't know that you can make a budget direction without more information, but I'm willing to get you additional data if you'd like to see it on the step plan.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to wrap it up so I can just be done and you guys can comment, but thank you. I agree with you that some more information would be great. Overall, I'm in support of this. I think that, first off, I want to thank you all for your work. I love the whole idea that we go first because we're not competing. We're just looking to take care of people and take care of our wonderful employees. And being named one of the best mid-sized employers in the country by Forbes magazine, I think this shows why we're one of those on that list is because we focus on taking care of our people and our people do great work taking care of our community and our residents. And I think that's really a really important principle. And I want to thank you all for the work because I can see that you all love this. And I'm glad that you love it because I love it too. And it's just great because we can't do the work we do without these amazing employees. And so important to take care of them. Secondly, I think your comment was we put people first. And that shows, and thank you for that, and that's how I feel too. So I really want to thank you all for that, that value, that principle, and leading with that. And I know you all have really been struggling with how do we find these markets, and we didn't have that data set. I want to just commend you for a job well done building this and sharing it, and because I think will help everyone because it's great that we're helping others. And so I wanted to just comment that that really hit my heart, and I think it's phenomenal and just tremendous job. And I look forward to getting more information. But overall, I'm in general support of this direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Of course. Thank you, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. Commissioner Stevens, your thoughts and everything else.
Sure, my thoughts are that I agree with the increases that you've proposed here. They're certainly in line with things that we've done in the past. While inflation rate is not something that's a factor, it's nice that when we can cover that because we know costs of goods are going up for folks. I will say that this is why we so meticulously look at a budget and how many full-time employees are added to a budget because, for every 1% of increase, $1.8 million is a lot, and that goes up every year significantly if you bring in a lot of people. So it's why we've always operated leanly, but we appreciate the work that people do, and we want to compensate them for the work that they do. So I appreciate this data-driven way to come at this, what we need to pay folks. So I think it seems fair to me. And I like that you're collecting data from other places and also sharing out that data. I think that's really important. So, and then with regard to the step plan, I mean, I would say that also sounds fair, and I understand some of the challenges that we've had with some of the sworn officers. So I think getting just a little bit more information about how that works into the budget, that 615 million, or 650 million. Whoa. Sorry.
I could do a lot with that.
That raise just got way too high. 615,000. See, that's what you get when you read without your reading glasses. It doesn't seem an insurmountable amount of money, but I think just having due diligence around, kind of looking at, where that would come from in the budget and how we would accommodate that would be good before we make that decision. But
Can I make a suggestion?
It's certainly not out of line.
I'd like to make a suggestion about how we come back to you about that. There are a couple of things you all could do. You could tell us to increase their target, which I don't think we're ready to do today. What I think maybe we should have them do is do a service proposal. Look inside their budget, see if they can come up with any of that amount. If they can't, then we'll have them do a service proposal, which we can then compare to other costs across the county, not just as a one-off just for this purpose, but as part of a bigger discussion. They may also come with an increase to the top of the step, so there may be 2 service proposals related to that. They are concerned about that. That is an issue that they're looking at internally. I don't know if it'll come this year or next year. But those conversations with the departments and offices about their budget are really helpful to understand what they've done to try to come up with a portion of that, or if they're just not able based on operating. So maybe that's the way we come back as we do our next budget retreat. We will have followed through with all these meetings. We can tell you the impact and where we might find it.
I appreciate that. I like that approach. I think I would be in favor of that. Thank you.
Yeah, and what we'll do is just message to employees that the decision on the adjustment for the step plan won't be made until later in the year throughout the budget process, because other employees will get their notice. Usually, once we get the budget direction from you, we go back out and we say, employees, here's the direction we received from the commissioners. So we'll work with Fayin, and then if that's the decision, we'll hold and say step employees. You won't know till later in the year.
So the direction from the commissioners, I think, comes from all three of us. I think we're generally in support, and certainly the comments from our county manager. Regarding the additional information, I'm glad that you mentioned options for securing the $615,000 or $617,000. You know, what are some of the considerations there? So I think that's important. So I agree with my colleagues to support these recommendations. I'm curious, what is the proposed hit on the budget with what we've been talking about? What?
1.8 times 5%. But I guess
Yeah.
it's not
It
exactly
would
because
be-
the.
It's bad math again.
So what's
Okay.
the dollar amount you're
Including
putting into the
benefits,
budget?
it's-
What's that?
Including benefits, about 7 million countywide. That includes all departments, all funds.
7 million?
That would be, when you say benefits,
That
you
would
mean the
be-
payroll matching costs, the
Yeah,
benefits.
so there are some costs associated with salaries like retirement match, payroll, taxes.
Okay. Thank you.
Workers' comp,
any-
any percentage-based benefits increase with the cost of
Okay.
salary increases.
Well, if there's nothing else, is there anything else, Bridget, or Eileen?
You
or
guys have the
Matt?
direction you need? Good?
Yeah.
I think we have it.
Then, well done. Thank you for your good work. And at 2:27 PM, we are adjourned.